Welcome to Life Transformation Radio. This show is all about life transformations and our journey from where we were to why we are doing what we are doing today. We will discuss the hiccups, the roller coasters, and the blood, sweat, and tears that has been poured out while discovering our purpose. It is all about our transformations. Here is your host, Sean Douglas.
Hey everyone, welcome on this amazing Tuesday to another episode of Life Transformation Radio. I'm your host, Master Resilience Implementer, TEDx speaker, business positioning strategist, and international best-selling author, Sean Douglas. This show is currently heard in over 90 countries. So whether it's your first time joining us or you've been listening to us for some time, I want to thank you to those who are listening from around the world. Life Transformation Radio is all about our transformation. Here, we tell the stories of why we're doing what we're doing, highlighting that transformational moment that changed our lives, and how we use it to then transform others and elevate their lives as well. You can listen to us live right here on the Blog Talk Radio Network, Tuesday through Friday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join our Facebook group. Search for Life Transformation Radio Community inside that Facebook search. Go ahead and click on that join button and join in the conversations that we have around our show, interacting with the guests that we bring here. You can also subscribe, rate, and review Life Transformation Radio on your favorite podcast platform. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Overcast, CastBox, Google Podcasts. We're available on Pandora, and we are available on YouTube as well. Go to YouTube and search for Life Transformation Radio. Go ahead and subscribe, and you can even like our videos. On the show, my guests are entrepreneurs, speakers, business owners, coaches, podcasters, authors, amazing human beings that are having an impact in the world around them. And my guest today has done exactly that. If you have any questions for any of the guests that I bring on the show during our live broadcast, Tuesday through Friday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, go ahead and give us a call at 657-383-1109. Again, the number is 657-383-1109. And with that, please help me welcome to the show my amazing guest for today, Judi Miller. Judi, welcome.
It's so great to be here, Sean. Thank you so much.
I've read a lot about you. I've seen and heard, and I love what you have going on in this world. The shift, the energy, the mindset. I think this is going to be a really amazing show.
I know you will be a great host, so I'm sure it'll be an amazing show.
Thank you. The title of this episode is A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation with author Judi Miller. She started her career as a certified public accountant and went on to excel in the world of corporate finance for over 20 years. Most of her life has been dedicated to personal development and helping others excel in a constantly changing environment. Over the past several years, Judi's interest shifted towards spirituality. Her growth was no longer aimed at making herself better. Instead, she began to focus on finding her intrinsic wholeness. This shift brought her numerous lessons around the nature of the Creator, forgiveness, and the trajectory each soul follows throughout the course of many lives. Today, sharing these lessons is an integral part of her journey. As a coach, speaker, and author, she shares her relatable and heartfelt messages with others who want to be awakened to their true greatness and experience lasting happiness. Judi has trained with some of the world's most spiritual visionaries and is certified in the energy codes, Happy for No Reason, and the Passion Test. She will inspire you to live a more passionate life filled with greater clarity, joy, and happiness. Her website is Judi with an I, Judi, JudiMiller.net. Her Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are right there in the show notes. Go ahead and click on them. Send her a friend request, letting her know that you listened to this episode of Life Transformation Radio. Judi, after reading that, I got to know the first question, why? Why do you do what you do?
That's a great question, Sean. Sean, have you ever felt different, like you didn't belong?
All the time.
Have you ever felt incomplete, maybe searching for someone or something to make you feel whole?
So, yes. And what I will say to that is I still, to this day, right this moment, right now, for many years, I felt like I was supposed to invent the light bulb, Uber, the car, something, government. I don't know what it is. I'm supposed to invent something that changes the world. I literally feel that. I just don't know what it is. But I feel like I'm destined for something. I just don't know what it is.
Wow, that's amazing. And then my last question for you and your listeners. Have you ever felt unworthy, always having to prove yourself over and over again?
Yep. I spent 20 years in the military doing that.
Well, the reason I ask you and your listeners these questions is because these feelings have literally plagued me for most of my life. But I learned how to let them go. And my desire and my wish for sharing my story with people is so they could also learn to let go of the stories that no longer serve them, so they could also experience true and ultimate freedom and happiness. So that's my big why.
I love how you open that. I mean, that's amazing. When I go on stage, I open with questions as well because they're very thought-provoking, and you definitely accomplished that. It got me thinking. Like, I have. Yeah, actually, I have. Like, nobody's really asked me that before, but yeah, I have. So it's a little vulnerable moment. I don't know how I feel about that, but thank you for making me feel vulnerable.
Well, I am so appreciative of your openness and your honesty, so thank you. You know, when you introduced me, you said the subtitle. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
You're about to ask something. Go ahead, please.
Nope. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, when you introduced the book, Perfect, you mentioned the subtitle was A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. And I just wanted to provide your listeners with a definition of forgiveness because there's so many different definitions of forgiveness. But for me, it's really, really simple. It means to forego or to let go of. So painful and unwanted events are going to happen to all of us. We could either experience the event once, or we could literally play it over and over again until it becomes stuck. It becomes our identity. So for me, forgiveness really is just letting go of those contracted negative stories that no longer serve us.
I wanna stay here for a second and talk about this. In 2014, 15, I'm a very dedicated person, very loyal person. I mean, I spent 20 years in the military. I was kicked out of a car club because my dedication to excellence was off-putting. Literally what they said. I want to go have our club represented in car shows. I want to enter our cars into car shows to win trophies. I want to go and mingle with other club presidents. I want to go 50 to 80 miles away so that people are like, wow, you have a car club? Where are you from? Oh, that's cool. Hey, we're going to have a show. Why don't you come down? But I want to spread the influence. That's what I want to do. We had 2 car shows, and people were complaining that they had to work, and it's just a hobby, and why are you doing this to us? And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I was in it. I'm all in. And they told me, it's like, man, you got to go. Like we don't want to do this. I literally got kicked out of a car club because my dedication to excellence was off-putting, is exactly what the club president said. That stuck with me. For months, I would agonize over this. I'm like, how? How can you say this to me? And I would talk to other members. I'm like, what? And they'd call me like, hey, man, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. But there was a big group of people that were like, yeah, I don't want to do this. And, you know, it's either me or him, you know. And so yeah, I was pushed out. But that stuck with me. And every time I think about it, I just shake my head. I'm like, how? How can you tell somebody that their dedication to excellence is bad or it's wrong? Like, that's insane to me, you know. And I didn't forgive anybody. I was just mad for like 6 months. I was just angry and mad. I didn't go to car shows. I basically sat at home and sulked for like 6 months.
Well, Sean, that's a great example. So forgiveness for me is just letting go of the contracted stories that we hold. It's not condoning the actions of another person. It's just getting us out of that cycle of victimhood. So there's a famous saying, and it's often attributed to Nelson Mandela. Resentment is like drinking poison and wishing the other person would die. So that's what not forgiving someone is. It's holding on to that contraction hoping that somehow it's going to punish another person, but the only person it's punishing is yourself.
Yep, 100%. Absolutely 100% agree, which is why, and I read that at one point, and it's so true, and I was like, like, I cannot believe this, and so I would tell people, I'm like, oh my gosh, listen to what happened. Dude, I don't, like, you've already told the story already, like, I'm like, but it bugs me, and I never knew, because nobody else would talk to me about, like, people in the club, like, they wouldn't talk to me about it, and this is something that I helped build from the ground up. I built this thing, and it was just, it was taken, and I felt like so I felt unworthy, right, and I felt like that I wanted to belong, and I feel like a lot of people feel that same way. A relationship with, they got cheated on, or there's something that they did that caused the relationship to dissolve, or there's a working relationship that dissolves. You get fired from a job because of something you may or may not have done. Like, there's a lot of reasons. But immediately when I read drink poison waiting for others to die, I'm like, that's exactly what I'm doing. Like, I'm so full of hate, and I'm so full of contempt towards those group of people, that it's having an impact on my life. It's having an impact with my friends. It's having an impact with my wife, with my kids. They see it. They're like, well, just go start your own. I was like, no, I want mine. I want the one I started. So I was kind of being an adult child, and that was a hard moment. But there's other times where a friend has wronged me, and I was like, ooh, I'm gonna get him back. Oh man, I'm gonna get him. And so as I look back at these moments of forgiveness, that's tough to say, because I thought that forgiveness meant I'm okay with what they did.
And it's absolutely not that. It's not condoning the other person's actions at all. For me, it's really just a gift that you give yourself, because it's an act of self-love. Mm-hmm. So, Sean, there's a story in the forward to my book, which I'd just love to share with you. Angelise Arian is a cultural anthropologist, and she says that in certain indigenous cultures, it's important to share your stories with loving and supportive people, but no more than 3 times. After you repeat your story more than 3 times, they will literally take you and hang you over a cliff until you're willing to let go of the story and actually see the wisdom in the situation. So when you were just being so open and so vulnerable, it just made me think of that story that I wanted to share it with you.
I still, I honestly still to this day see no wisdom in what happened. Like, I busted my butt for this, and they were like, go away. So I've pretty much written it off. I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't care no more. It is what it is, right? It's what happened, and I think a part of forgiveness is acceptance. So you don't necessarily have to like what happened. And it's definitely not okay if something happened that hurt you and harmed you. If like domestic violence, this is definitely not okay. You forgive that person. It's not saying that behavior was acceptable. It's saying that you accept what happened and you move on from that moment.
Right.
And I think that if you replace forgiveness with acceptance.
So, when we were defining forgiveness in the very beginning, I said forgiveness for me is really just letting go of the contracted negative story. So painful and unwanted events are going to happen to all of us. We're going to all have those experiences that we wish that we didn't, right? So we could either experience it once or we continue to tell the story. So we experience it over and over again. So forgiveness is just so you can let go of the story, so you don't have to relive it, so you don't have to be a prisoner to it. So again, I just want to reemphasize that it's not forgiving the other person's actions.
Got it. Yeah, I like it, and it makes sense. And I, like I said, looking back at the moments, that I didn't forgive somebody, I can definitely see how that plays out for sure. Mm-hmm. With transformation, and I love the title of your book, A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. The show was about transformation, and as we go through life, we go through many transformations, not just one or two. We go through a lot of transitions. So for you, what would you say is a transformational moment that's happened in your life and put you on the path to what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So, Sean, if I can share with you and your listeners just an overview of my story, you can see how I was able to transform and how I offer it to other people as well. So like many children, I had fears as a child. I was actually afraid of drowning, but I was terrified of the night. And it was more than just monsters under the bed or monsters in the closet. It was true terror. I was so afraid of going to sleep every night because I could literally sense and feel different energies, and I didn't know if they were there to help me or to harm me. So as a child, I would literally crawl into bed, pull the covers over my head, recite the Lord's Prayer over and over again until exhausted I would fall asleep. And Sean, this was my ritual night after night, and it continued well into my 20s. I started my career as a CPA, very traditional profession. So here I was going to work during the day, and then at night, terrified, truly terrified of what I couldn't explain. I actually met my husband at work. He's a CPA also, and we got married and we had 2 kids. And in the exhaustion of raising 2 kids, commuting 3 to 4 hours a day to work, and working 40 to 50 hours a week, in that exhaustion, the terror actually went away. But then my kids grew up, and then they went off to college, and the house became silent. And in that silence, everything returned. The fear, the terror, all returned. I would wake up in the middle of the night clutching the fear in my husband, and soon we both began to lose sleep. So, Sean, around the same time, I actually started to bleed uncontrollably month after month, and my doctor said that I needed to get a hysterectomy. I was terrified of the surgery, and I didn't understand why. So after becoming a CPA, I went to work in finance in the healthcare industry for over 25 years, so I trust modern medicine. So this terror of the surgery was totally uncharacteristic, but it felt like the same terror that I had as a child and the same terror that returned to me as an adult. So a good friend of mine recommended that I read a book called Light Emerging by Barbara Brennan. And Barbara was a former NASA physicist, and she actually studied the human energy field. And what she learned from that, she was actually able to heal people. So literally days before my surgery, I was Googling healers near me. And Sean, as I sat across from my healer for that very first time, I literally felt like my entire life was clicking and locking into place. But I didn't know the role that that healer would actually play in my family's history. So my healer helped me heal after my surgery, and then we started to explore this uncontrollable fear and terror that I had of the night. We looked at my childhood experiences to see if anything had triggered it, but nothing came to light. And then we started to talk about my parents. We know that we all inherit so many things from our parents. The color of our hair, the color of our eyes, the shape of our nose. But the science of epigenetics says that we could actually inherit the pain and the trauma from our parents as well as our ancestors.
Yep.
So the science of
epigenetics,
yeah, absolutely. It shows that Holocaust survivors, the pain and the fear that they experienced was often encoded in their children and their grandchildren's bodies as well. They've shown with experiments with mice that you can introduce the smell of cherry blossoms and then gently zap mice on the feet, right? And then, Sean, as you can imagine, after a while, just the smell of cherry blossoms would trigger that same fear in the mice. But what was truly astonishing was that the mice's children and their children would be triggered with that same fear and terror just by the scent of cherry blossoms, even though they'd never been zapped and even though they were actually never exposed to the father that was zapped. So what we learned on this journey was that fear and that terror, that I felt every night wasn't actually my own. It was the fear and the terror that I inherited from my mother that I never even knew. But, Sean, they say every female baby is born with 2 to 3 million of their reproductive eggs at birth. So on a cellular level, you were actually in your mother's body for much of her adult life as an unborn egg. So the traumas and the triumphs that she experienced, you were actually there. So that cellular memory that I had of this experience is what lived and what was triggered in my body. But, Sean, my story doesn't end there. And I'm not going to give away the whole story, but it doesn't end there. There's actually a shocking connection to the very healer
I'm so
that I
intrigued right
trusted
now.
to heal me. But
oh my
what's
God,
the revelation?
that's amazing.
So when I realized the connection to the healer that I trusted, when I realized the connection, I could have felt fear, I could have felt anger, I could have felt betrayal, but I didn't. All I experienced was the love and the perfection of the universe, and I saw how all of our souls are actually interconnected, and how we are truly unconditionally loved and accepted, and how we could heal in any moment in this lifetime or in any other. So that was truly my transformational journey, to say the least.
Yeah. Holy smokes. So I'm reminded of a show that I did this year. Gosh, it was either this year or last year, but so I'm pretty sure it was last year. She is a genetic healer. I forget what it's called, but she basically goes back and said, I don't know, 100 years ago, this one event happened, and it's transferred down through generation to generation to generation to generation. Like all of the women have this one issue, or all of the men have this one issue, and we want to fix that. So she does some kind of meditation, finds that event in history, and then heals that event. And it's a really, I want to say weird, but it's mind opening. It's not even mind blowing. It's mind opening. And I mean, when you're talking about, all of the things that you were talking about on a cellular level and cellular memory, it just coincides with what we talked about on that episode. It's amazing the stuff that's out there.
It absolutely is. It sounds like she was doing ancestral clearing or ancestral healing. Some Native American cultures believe. Right. Some Native American cultures, she may have mentioned this, actually believe that we can heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know what she talked about, but our bodies are infinitely intelligent. And the traumas that we either experience in this lifetime or we inherited from our parents or our ancestors actually get stuck in our body. So our bodies actually tell us where the trauma exists. And part of what I discuss in the book is first to realize, where do you have that contraction in your body? And many people believe that they have to understand where it comes from. Did it come from something that happened in this lifetime, or did it happen to originate from a previous lifetime, your ancestors, your parents, etc.? But you actually don't even need to know. You just need to be able to feel and notice where that sensation is. And what I describe in the book is, once you feel and notice where that sensation is, as you breathe into that sensation, oftentimes an image or memory will come to you, and it often feels like you're making it up. It's often when you're young. It could be when you're actually in your mother's womb. It could actually be from a previous lifetime, something that your parents experienced. And it'll often come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment of stress or trauma or burden, often a saying, something you were saying to yourself, will often come to you, like, why is he here? Why is this happening? I can't survive. And often by giving that younger version of yourself a voice and actually breathing into the contracted energy in your body and saying, some people say mantras, some people say forgiveness prayers, you're actually able to soften and eventually release that burden that lives in your body. So that's a version of, what I've been trained in, and I don't know if it's similar to what she talks about, but it is extremely powerful.
It's about the same, yeah. Yep, sounds about the same.
Yeah, it's amazing what our bodies,
that's pretty cool.
Our bodies hold.
Right,
but,
absolutely. Wow.
Absolutely. You were talking about transformational moments, and there were actually a couple in the book that I would love to share with you and your listeners if we have time.
Sure.
So So the first one that actually started this entire journey actually happens on Good Friday. I happened to be sitting in Mass with my family. My kids were probably texting, and I was just listening to the choir singing before the Mass started. And as I sat there, this overwhelming sense of love literally descended upon me out of nowhere. And it felt like every version of love you could possibly imagine, multiplied 1,000,000 times. And it was just coursing through my body, through every cell, and it just began to overflow in a sense of love and a sense of tears. And I literally was like looking around the church underneath the pews to see if anybody else was going through this experience, but nobody else was. And this voice came to me and it said, it's time for you to step forward and serve. But what was so overwhelming for me was that overwhelming sense of love. And it almost sounds like a near-death experience. I was literally like dying with my eyes wide open. And the reason I wanted to share that with you is because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I always felt different, incomplete, and unworthy most of my life. And many people, like yourself and your listeners, can often relate to that. But when you realize how incredibly loved we are, you would never doubt yourself again. So that was really the transformational moment that set me off on this path of really sharing the story and committing to helping people.
I love that. Yeah, I like that a lot. I don't know where this unworthiness comes from. Confidence, maybe? I remember starting out in business for the first time, and of course no one hires you because no one knows you. It's like this catch-22. Like you're a speaker, you can't get booked to speak because you don't have video of you speaking, but you can't get video of you speaking because you can't get booked to speak. So it's like so what do I do? So what I did was I got on 3 different outfits, and I was in a library in a classroom, and I delivered my talk, the beginning, the middle, and the end, in 3 different outfits, in different parts of the room, different backdrops and things. And then I just pieced it together, like the best parts of it. I just pieced it together. And that was my first speaker reel. And then I got an event, and then I took one piece out and put that event in. And then I got another event, and I took that out and put that in, and took that out and put that in. And I just kept on moving things around and updating until finally a TEDx talk happened, which was like a complete dream come true, by the way. But still you get no's. You're like, but I'm a TEDx speaker. I should be on thousands of stages, And I've had to realize, and this stems from way back when too, but I've had to realize early on in business, started my first business in 2004, that not every client or not every person is your client. Not every single person is your sale. So this unworthiness that I used to felt like, why do they not want what I offer? It's amazing. It was almost like personal to me.
Wow. So I'd love to share another story from the book, which might address this directly, and I think it also addresses some of that unworthiness and loneliness and isolation that people feel right now, given everything that's going on. So my healer offered to hypnotize me. She felt that maybe there was something from my past or something from my childhood that, I just couldn't remember, right? So by going through hypnosis, we might be able to uncover some of where these fears were coming from. But as I laid on her table, I started to ascend through this purple haze and then into this bright white light again. And again, I tell you, these experiences really sound like near-death experiences to me, but I wasn't dying and I wasn't dead. And as I ascended through the purple haze and out into the bright white light, I got another message. And I just wanted to share this with you and your listeners again because I think it's so relevant to our times. It said, you can always come home. We could all go home by loving and accepting who we are exactly as we are. The joys in the reunion and the remembrance of who we are, because so many of us have forgotten. So I just wanted to share that with you because you were talking about, how, you felt unworthy. Here you are, this TEDx speaker. They should be beating down your door to have you speak. But the other reason I wanted to share it with your listeners as well is, during COVID-19, so many of us are being sent home. And I can't help but see the parallel. I feel that a lot of the loneliness and isolation that we feel as humans is not because we're isolated from each other. It's because we've become disconnected from our Creator, the God of our understanding. But we've also become disconnected from the essence of who we are, our true selves. Because so many of us have abandoned ourselves emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And this is our opportunity to reconnect.
So they had a news story come out about the kids that were home during the COVID stuff, lockdown, no school, whatever. And they said that sometimes, more often than we want to say, is that kids aren't eating at home, and therefore the lockdown is like really bad for these kids. And I was like, well, what do they do during the summer? Like, I mean, obviously they're not in school in the summer, so what are they doing for the summer? But in certain school districts, they were saying that the kids being home is not a good thing, not only because of the learning, but because sometimes the only safe place for these kids is a school. That's where they get. That's where they eat. That's where they're shown affection. That's where they're shown trust. Brings out the best in these kids. And I think that people being home all the time without a job, or maybe they're teleworking or whatever, the rates of suicide has gone up. The rates of depression have gone up. The rates of mental illness diagnosis has gone up. And I think it's because we're alone to our own devices. Most people go home from their job as a break from their job, go to their job as a break from their home. They need a break from their home life, and they love having a job. And if you don't have that job and you're just stuck at home all the time, you're surrounded in those four walls with yourself, with your devices. And by devices, I mean your phone, searching on social media, all the negativity that flows there. You've got Netflix that you can only watch so many times, and there's a lot of negative shows. I mean, we just saw the whole Cuties thing blow up. There's a lot of Black Lives Matter movies on there. There's a lot of other controversial stuff that's on there that people care not to see or for whatever reason don't like. There's a lot going on right now. And I just feel like people are stuck, and there's things that they've run away from. If you and your spouse lost your job during COVID, you are now home with each other all the time. Guess what? You now have to talk to each other. And that's hard for people. It's hard. There's conversations that need to happen, but they're not happening. There's conversations that need to take place with your children that weren't happening before, that you're forced to have now. And it sometimes manifests in a screaming match and yelling and shouting and hitting, and it manifests in the worst way. So I completely 100% agree with you that I think COVID opened up the minds of people, and number one, how ugly the world is. Number two, and how people can be so mean and hateful. And number two, I think that it opened up the realization that we really don't know who we are.
Absolutely. And a friend shared with me a story. I don't have the details exact, but the overall gist is the same. So they had this experiment, and they had people put in a room by themselves, and maybe it was for an hour. And in the room there was one thing, a button, that if they pushed the button, they would actually get an electric shock. And they knew that. But people couldn't spend an hour by themselves. They would prefer to give themselves an electric shock rather than sit there for an hour in their own self-thought.
No way.
So it was so surprising that so many people actually chose to shock themselves rather than sit there just thinking with their own thoughts.
Okay,
so
I have to look this up.
I found
now,
that incredible.
I have to get whoever instituted that study. I now have to have them on my show. They're coming on my show. Whoever it was that created that. Have you ever heard of the Stanford experiment?
I might not know the name, but if you tell me about it, I may have.
So a Stanford teacher, and I believe it was in the 70s. I always get that part right. Was it the 70s, 80s? Something like that, 70s or 80s. So they had students for a predetermined time that you were guards, and then the other students were prisoners. And you had to walk through the daily life of a prisoner and guard like every day. So they'd go home and they come back in, put your outfits on, and now you're guard and now you're prisoner. And he just looked at how people were treated. And then he said, oh, okay, now switch. And then halfway through the study, they had to stop because people were getting beaten. They were getting yelled at. People were trying to commit suicide. I mean, it was an experiment on how human behavior is directly correlated to your environment. And so It's called the Stanford experiment. I believe it's experiment, Stanford experiment. But I want to get that guy. I think he passed now, but I'd love to have that guy on there. Like, what made you think of this? Like, why would you do that to your kids? But there were psychological breaks. There were people that suffered major depression. There were people that completely changed their worldview. So I'm always fascinated by studies and how they decided that I'm going to make a study about this. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. It
Completely
sounds like a very interesting study.
Oh, my God. And they actually made a movie about it. You got to watch the movie. The movie is insane. You got to watch the movie. It is nuts.
And what is it called? Is it called the Stanford study?
I'm pretty sure it's called the Stanford experiment. It is really Stanford prison experiment. It's a study that was done, and they made a movie about it. And the Stanford experiment lasted from August 14th, 1971 to August 20th, 1971. So 6 days. They couldn't even go. It was a 2-week investigation into the psychology of prison life, and it had to be ended only after 6 days because of the situation that and they studied the psychological effects of perceived power. They studied the psychological effects between prisoners and prison officers, and how that beating down of, and they didn't give them any parameters. It was like, you're a guard, you're a prisoner, treat them like a prisoner. And the students were left. They weren't coached. They weren't nothing. And that was really bad. That was really bad.
Wow.
Yep.
So we have to leave your listeners with a positive story then. So can I give you a positive story? Are you familiar with Ho'oponopono? Are you familiar with Ho'oponopono?
I think so. Yes. I think so. Yes.
Okay. So are your listeners?
I'm not sure.
So just really quickly. So, my book is about forgiveness, and one of the things that I talk about is the Ho'oponopono prayer, and it's become very famous recently because Dr. Joe Vitale and Dr. Hewlin wrote a book called Zero Limits. But the Ho'oponopono prayer is very simple. It's a Hawaiian traditional prayer, and it's 4 sentences. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And Dr. Hewlin used to be the head of a psychiatric ward in Hawaii, and his patients were very violent, and they actually had to be constantly restrained. So instead of interacting with these potentially dangerous patients, each day he would spend time actually holding in his office their file, and he would say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And then he would focus on the file. Then he would go to the next file, and he would do the same thing over and over again. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And after a year, the patients were actually able to become unrestrained, and after 3 years, they were actually able to close the ward because they had no more patients to treat. So
wow.
Very powerful, the power of forgiveness. so I talk about it in the book. It is amazing.
You're way better than mine. Yeah, it was a way better study than mine.
No, I think we just had to be balanced. We had to include, both sides.
Right, absolutely. So let's talk about how you elevate the world around you. You've got your book, A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation, which sounds absolutely incredible. I'm gonna go search for it and pick up a copy myself. But tell people who the book is for and what they can expect.
Sure. So the book is for anyone who's ever had to let go of a story that no longer serves them. And the book is actually broken up into three parts. 80 to 90% of the book is actually written like a novel. So you want to know how it actually ends, and you can actually go through the experience. And then there's a handful of pages, which I call reflections, which help you learn what are some of the lessons along the way so you could apply it in your own life. And then there's a couple of pages, which are exercises, very, very simple exercises, because I know how busy people are, so they can embody these lessons and learn to truly let go of the stories that no longer serve them. So that's, Sean, how the book is actually broken out. They could get it anywhere, but I recommend that they go to my website, which is judimiller.net. And with the launch of this book, with the purchase of the book, there's actually 5 free bonus gifts from some of my favorite mentors on happiness, success, meditation, love, etc. And the reason that we wanted to give it away free with the book is because these are the people that helped me transform my life, and I just wanted to share that with listeners as well. And Sean, I don't know about you, but I love free things. So if you go to my website with judimiller.net, I also have a free ebook. No purchase is necessary. It's called Awaken the Creative Within, and that's just my gift to listeners.
Oh, nice. Love it. Very cool. That sounds like a great book too.
And all
awesome.
my social media handles are there. My social media handles are there. My blog is there. So everything you would ever want to know about Judi Miller is probably there.
Awesome. And you're a speaker too. So if somebody wanted to book you, how would they do that?
Sure. So I have a contact information on my website, and they can just send me an email, and I'll get back to them right away.
Awesome. Perfect. So in the time remaining that we have, I want to talk about the message that you want to give to the listeners if they are tuning in right at this moment, or they just fast forwarded to the end of the show. What is the message that you want to leave the listeners with today?
Sure. So my book is about letting go of our stories, right? So when we let go of our stories, labels, and judgments, we see everything through the eyes of the Creator, through the eyes of love, where there is no separation. And I think it's an important message for our times, given everything that's going on, Sean.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 months of 2020. But what I am 100% certain of, people are ready for 2021. They're so done with this year.
I would agree with you. But you know something?
I saw something. Yeah.
I was going to say, but it's in many respects it helps us to become more grateful for the little things that we've taken for granted. So that's been a huge lesson for me, I know.
Yeah. Oh, Yep. I agree. I saw something on Facebook the other day that just had me dying laughing. Well, there's 2 things. One, somebody put a big, huge 2020 sign on their front lawn with some hay bales and some pumpkins and said, "This is the most scariest yard I've ever seen," which was super funny.
I love that.
And
that is great.
And then I saw a meme that said, back in the spring, we sprung forward. On Friday there was a full moon. It was Friday the 13th, and it was Mercury retrograde. And then it said, this coming fall, we fall backwards. It's a full moon retrograde again. I don't know if it's a Venus retrograde. I don't know, but I thought it said retrograde. And they said, hopefully this is the reset button to 2020.
Wow, I hope so too.
That made me laugh. I'm like, that's awesome. That's pretty clever. I wish I was that clever. That's pretty good. So, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Judi, for being an amazing guest on the phone, on the show. Absolutely incredible journey that you've been on. I love everything about what you got going on. I'm going to definitely get a copy of the book, check out your website. So I invite the listeners to do the same. So with that, Judi, thank you so much for being an amazing guest.
Thank you, Sean, so much for being here. It was an absolute pleasure and an honor.
Life Transformation Radio listeners, an amazing guest impacting the world around her. If anything has resonated with our conversation today on Life Transformation Radio with Judi Miller, please reach out to her. Go to her website at Judi, with an I, judimiller.net. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, right there in the show notes. Click on those, copy and paste them into your browser, and connect with her on your favorite social media platform. Send her a friend request, letting her know that you listened to this episode of Life Transformation Radio. Make sure to subscribe, and if you want to, leave a rating or review. But we'd love for you to subscribe to Life Transformation Radio so that you do not miss any of the upcoming episodes. And with that, I close the show by saying live your brand. Find opportunities every day to live out the core values that you hold deep in your heart. And I call this living your brand. So until next episode, live a great life.